The elevator doors slid open, revealing a man in a faded janitor's uniform, wrinkled, worn, and smelling of cheap detergent. No one glanced his way. Not the sharp-dressed executives scrolling through their phones, not the receptionist filing her nails, not even the security guard who barely lifted his eyes from the football game on his screen. But this wasn't just any janitor. Hidden beneath the scuffed work boots and the name tag that read Mike was Daniel Carter, a billionaire who built an empire from nothing. And tonight, he was about to discover the ugly truth about the people who worked for him. For years, Daniel had wondered, if I lost it all tomorrow, would anyone still care about me? So he devised a plan, a disguise, a test. He would spend 1 month as Mike, the invisible janitor, cleaning the very offices he owned. If people treated him with kindness, he'd reward them. If they showed their true colors, well, they'd regret it. First day was worse than he expected. The receptionist, Sarah, wrinkled her nose when he passed by. Jason, the loud-mouthed office manager, smirked and tossed a crumpled soda can at his feet. "Clean that up, old man," he sneered. Only one person, Lisa, the quiet intern, gave him a hesitant smile. But Daniel wasn't here for kindness. He was here for the truth, and what happened next would change the company forever. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel, now Mike, pushed his mop bucket down the hallway, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. Every glance thrown his way felt like a knife. The receptionist, Sarah, didn't even look up from her phone when he passed. "Restroom on the 3rd floor needs attention," she muttered, waving a hand dismissively. He nodded, playing his part, but inside his stomach twisted. This was his building, his company, and to them he was nothing. Then came Jason, loud, brash, with a smirk that made Daniel's fists clench. "Hey, Mikey," the office manager called out, slapping a stack of files onto a nearby desk. Papers spilled everywhere. "Oops, guess you've got something to do now, huh?" A few nearby employees chuckled. Daniel forced a tight smile and bent to pick them up, his mind racing. Was this how they treated people they thought were beneath them? Then a small mercy. Lisa, the young intern with tired eyes, hesitated near the break room. She glanced at him, then at Jason's retreating back, and quietly poured a second cup of coffee. "Here," she said, pressing it into his hands. "Long day, right?" For a moment, Daniel forgot he was wearing a disguise. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he just nodded, gripping the warm cup like a lifeline. She had no idea who she was really helping. And that made her kindness cut deeper than any insult. At lunch, his back ached, his pride was bruised, and his mind swirled with quiet fury. He ate alone in the janitor's closet, the muffled laughter of the office just outside the door. They had no idea what was coming. And the worst part, he wasn't sure if he wanted to punish them or pity them. One thing was certain, tomorrow he'd be back, and the real test was just beginning. Coffee hit the floor in a scalding brown splash, droplets spraying across Daniel's worn work boots. Jason's laugh cut through the sudden silence of the break room. "Whoops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Better get that, Mikey." Around them, a few employees snickered into their sandwiches. Daniel's fingers tightened around the mop handle. He could fire Jason right now, one phone call, and the arrogant office manager would be gone. But that wasn't the test. Slowly, he bent down to clean the mess, the bitter smell of coffee mixing with the acid taste of humiliation. Sarah found him later in the women's restroom, scrubbing at graffiti someone had scrawled across the mirror. "Took you long enough," she snapped, tapping her designer heel against the tile. "Some of us have actual work to do." As she flounced out, Daniel caught his reflection, the streaks of cleaner distorting his face into something unfamiliar. Was this really what people became when they thought no one important was watching? His own executives, the ones who laughed at his jokes in board meetings, walked right past Mike in the hallway without a second glance. The only light in the darkness came from Lisa. He found her one evening crying in a stairwell, medical bills spread across her lap. When she saw him, she hurried to wipe her eyes. "Sorry, Mike," she mumbled. "Just life, you know." Before he could stop himself, Daniel sat beside her. For an hour, they talked about her sick mother, about working 2 jobs, about how Jason had been stealing office supplies and selling them online. "I just don't know who to tell," she whispered. Daniel studied her tired face, the way her hands shook around the paperwork. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a janitor, just a man realizing how deep the rot in his company went, and how one kind intern might be the only person worth saving. At night, as Daniel changed out of his stained uniform in a gas station bathroom, he stared at his real face in the flickering light. The experiment wasn't working. He'd wanted to expose their cruelty, but all he'd discovered was his own blindness. The janitor's clothes piled at his feet like a shed skin. Tomorrow, he decided, the charade would end. One way or another, they would all see the truth, especially Jason. The mop bucket could wait. It was time for the billionaire to come out of hiding. The storage room door creaked as Daniel pushed it open, the dim light revealing stacks of printer paper and boxes of pens that should have been in the supply closet. His fingers brushed against an open ledger on the shelf, page after page of inventory discrepancies circled in red. Jason's sloppy handwriting marked each item. Sold eBay sale 95. A cold fury settled in Daniel's chest. He'd tolerated the insults, the spilled coffee, the mocking laughter. But this. Stealing from the very people who trusted him, his knuckles turned white around the ledger. The game had just changed. Lisa found him there, her eyes widening at the evidence in his hands. You know, she whispered. Before he could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. They barely had time to duck behind the shelves before Jason strolled in, whistling as he grabbed another box of toner cartridges. Daniel watched through the gap in the boxes as the office manager stuffed them into his gym bag, the same bag he'd bragged about buying with his side hustle money. Lisa's hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a gasp. In that moment, Daniel made his decision. He reached for his phone, the one hidden in his janitor's cart all along, and hit record. Later, as he helped Lisa carry files to her car, she finally broke. "I can't keep doing this," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Between Mom's hospital bills and Jason threatening to fire me if I talk." Daniel studied her trembling hands, the dark circles under her eyes. He thought about the years he'd spent focused on profits and stock prices while people like Lisa drowned. The disguise had shown him more than he'd ever wanted to see about his company, about himself. "Meet me in the main conference room tomorrow at noon," he said quietly. When she started to protest, he squeezed her shoulder. "Just trust me." That night, Daniel stared at the janitor uniform hanging in his penthouse closet. The experiment was over. Tomorrow, Mike would disappear, and Daniel Carter would return, not with quiet resignation, but with fire. They'd underestimated the janitor. Soon, they'd learn exactly how big of a mistake that was. The conference room buzzed with confused murmurs as employees filed in, some rolling their eyes at the mandatory meeting notice. Lisa sat near the back, twisting her hands in her lap. When the lights dimmed, all eyes turned to the projection screen, where security footage of Jason stealing supplies played in perfect clarity. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Jason shot up from his seat. "This is bullshit," he spat, face flushing crimson. Then the screen changed, showing Daniel's recorded voice asking calmly, "Who gave you permission to sell company property?" The room went dead silent. Side door creaked open. Every head turned as Mike walked in, still in his janitor's uniform, but standing taller than anyone had ever seen him. Jason's laugh was nervous now. "What's this loser doing here?" Daniel didn't blink. With deliberate fingers, he peeled off the prosthetic nose and wig, then removed the glasses that had hidden his eyes for weeks. The collective gasp was deafening. Sarah dropped her coffee. Lisa's hands flew to her mouth. Jason staggered back like he'd been punched. "Meet the real Mike," Daniel said, his voice no longer meek. "Or as you know him, your CEO." Chaos erupted. Employees whispered in panic, some suddenly remembering every cruel joke they'd made. Daniel let the silence stretch before tossing a folder onto the table. "Jason, clean out your desk. The police will be reviewing these theft records." Then his gaze found Lisa. "And you report to HR. Your new position as office manager starts today." The room exploded in murmurs. When Jason lunged forward, babbling denials, Daniel simply pressed play on the final recording, Jason threatening Lisa. "You were right about one thing," Daniel told the shaking man. "Some people are beneath me, but not in the way you thought." Security escorted Jason out. Daniel studied the sea of guilty faces. "Look around," he said quietly. "The janitor who served your coffee, cleaned your messes, he was me. But tomorrow," he yanked off the janitor's shirt, revealing his signature dress shirt underneath. "Tomorrow I'll be watching, and how you treat the real Mike. That'll determine whether you keep your jobs." The screen behind him lit up with new company policies, tripled janitorial salaries, anonymous reporting, mandatory empathy training. Lisa was the first to clap. One by one, others joined, some with tears in their eyes. Daniel didn't smile. The lesson wasn't over, not by a long shot. Morning sun streamed through the corporate lobby windows, catching the brass plaque that now read, "Lisa Chen, office manager." Daniel watched from the balcony above as she shook hands with the new janitor, an older man named Henry, and personally showed him where the good cleaning supplies were kept. Down in accounting, Sarah hesitantly brought Henry a coffee, her cheeks flushed with shame. The change wasn't perfect. Some still averted their eyes when passing maintenance staff, but it was a start. 3 months later, Daniel sat in his penthouse reviewing the reports. Theft had dropped to 0. Employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed, and Lisa, she'd implemented a program pairing executives with frontline workers for shadow shifts. The video of Jason's arrest still had 1 million views on the company intranet, a permanent reminder. Daniel set down the papers and reached for the janitor's cap hanging on his wall, not as a disguise this time, but as a trophy. The billionaire who became a nobody to remember what really mattered. The camera zoomed in on Daniel's face as he addressed his YouTube audience one final time. "We judge people by their uniforms, their job titles, the size of their paychecks," he said quietly. "But here's the truth I learned while pushing a mop. Real power isn't in wealth. It's in looking at the person the world ignores and seeing yourself." The screen faded to black, leaving only 3 words glowing in the dark. "Kindness changes everything."